Hey everybody, this is Mr. Walker. The purpose of this video is to go over some test corrections from the test that we took for Unit 1. Once you guys are done finishing up this test corrections video and passing all of the questions, please email me to let me know that you're finished. You need to get a 100% on these questions to raise your score. So let's go ahead and take a look. These are the top 4 missed questions from the test. So let's take a look at this one, number 2. Which of the following statements is correct based on the number line? All right, so I see a number line here where I have P at 0, Q is at 8, and then I look at the options. It says the square root of 68, and the first thing that pops out to me is that every question has to do with the square root of 68. So what I want to do is to kind of help us figure out where the square root of 68 is. Now, we use the double number line to help us out with these irrational numbers, meaning numbers that aren't perfect squares. So above these numbers right here, what I'm going to do is actually just write what it is when they're squared. So if I square 0, 0 times 0 is 0, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16, 6 times 6 is 36, and 8 times 8 is 64. So these are the numbers when you square. So the square root of 64, 8. Square root of 36, 6. Square root of 16, 4. Square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 0 is 0. Now, where would 68 fall? 68 would be a little bit further to the right of this 64. So that means it's a little bit bigger than 8. So when I look at the options, it says this number is to the right of point Q because it is less than 8. Well, that's not true because anything to the right is not going to be less. So that's not a correct answer. The next part says that the square root of 68 is between P and Q because it is less than 0 and greater than 8. Why would anything that's between here be less than 0? Letter C, square root of 68 is between points P and Q because it is greater than 0 and less than 8. Well, not quite, because we know that it's going to be over here to the right of the 8, or point Q. And then letter D, square root of 68 is to the right of point Q because it is greater than 8. So this is my option here. So remember, if you want to find out where these numbers are on a number line, first you have to use a double number line. Put the square roots on the bottom, and then what would the number squared be on the top? And that'll help you figure out where to place those imperfect squares or those irrational square roots on this number line. Okay, so there'll be another question coming up very similar to this one where you're going to have to place the square root of an irrational number or the square root of a number on a number line, or tell me where it's in between. All right, let's move on to question number 8 here. It says select all the possible solutions or values of x if x squared is 45. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. So I'm going to use a different pen color. Let's use this blue. All right, so x squared equals 45. Okay, so when I take x and I multiply it by itself, it gives me 45. That means that x would have to be the square root of 45. All right, because if I square 45, I get 45, and if I square x, I get x squared, right? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our options over here. I see a lot of different numbers that are next to square roots. Whenever you see a number next to a square root like this one right here, that means 3 times the square root of 5. This one means 15 times the square root of 3. This one means negative 9 times the square root of 5. And this one is just negative square root of 45. All right. So let's go ahead and do this one. This would be another irrational number because square root of 45 is not a perfect square. But what we can do is we could break up this number into two different factors, meaning two numbers that multiply to make 45, right? I know that 9 times 5 would make 45. So I have the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Now, 9 is a perfect square, so I can actually simplify that as 3, or plus or minus 3. And then the square root of 5 can't be simplified anymore because it's irrational. And now if I look at my options over on the left-hand side, I could see, okay, this could possibly be 1. This one isn't going to be 1. 15 times the square root of 3. I know that if I break apart 45, like we did before, I can break it down as 15 times 3. That is possible. But it's going to be the square root of 15 times the square root of 3. And you can't simplify that anymore. These two numbers are imperfect squares, so you can't simplify them any longer. Okay? This one I know is not going to be the option because we have to break down this square root of 9 as 3. And then the other one that could possibly be an answer is this one right here. So I'm going to tell you why that is in just a second, because let's try substituting, meaning I'm going to place this number in for x. So negative square root of 45, and then I'm going to square it and see if it's going to give me 45. All right. So anytime I multiply a number times itself, a negative times a negative, I will get a positive. So I'm going to have a positive answer here. And then if I square a square root, it's almost like they're going to cancel each other out. So you don't have that square root anymore. And remember, a negative times a negative would leave me with a positive. Well, this is positive, and this is positive. So this is another option, letter D. So A and D work for this one. Make sure that you guys work through the problem that comes afterwards. You need to get 100% on everything in order to get full credit. All right, let's scroll down to number 9. All right, select all the numbers that are irrational from this list. Now, numbers that are, let's go with what makes something rational. Rational numbers are whole numbers. So anything that's a whole number can be a rational number. So numbers like 1, 5, 7, you get the picture, and they could be negatives also. Now, fractions are also rational. So any fraction, doesn't matter what that fraction looks like. It could be 4/3, it could be 13/24, it doesn't matter. As if it's a fraction, it's rational. And then decimals that terminate, like this one, meaning they stop, or if they have some sort of pattern to them, that's okay too. That's rational. Okay? And square roots. As long as the square root is a perfect square, because when you find the square root of it, it gives us a whole number like that list from the first line. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Well, this one is rational because it's a terminating decimal. The next one is irrational because it's not a perfect square. This is rational because it comes from the fractions. Irrational because it's not a perfect square. Rational because the number is a decimal that repeats. And then square root of 25 is rational because this number is equal to 5. Okay, so you need to select all the numbers below that are irrational. It would have been B, D. All right, and lastly, the question down there at the very bottom, we have enter the value for n that makes this equation true. So this has to do with those laws of exponents that we were talking about at the very beginning of the year. Remember that if you are multiplying numbers that have the same base, all you have to do is add the exponents. So this right here would be 3 to the 8th. Now if you are dividing and they have the same base, you're going to subtract the exponents. If you have an exponent and you're raising it, like this one, you're going to multiply the exponents. 3 times 2, 6. And then if you have an exponent that has a negative exponent, you could rewrite it like this by putting it under a fraction under the 1. If the fraction already has an exponent that's negative, like this, you could rewrite it by flipping it. That's what it would look like. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have over here. 3 to some power times 3 to the second, all to the power of 4, will give me 3 to the 28th. Okay, so to solve this, we kind of have to solve it like an equation. So that 3 to the 28th, in order to get 28, we would have had to multiply this 4 times 7, right? We would have had to multiply it times 7. So inside of this parentheses, we know that 3 to the n times 3 squared should end up giving us 3 to the 7th, because this 28 would have been 4 times the 7. Now if I look at my rules from this one right here, we have to add the exponents when you're multiplying. 2 plus what number would give me this 7 in the corner? The n has to be a 5. And if we go back and we kind of check our answer here, if I replace this one with a 5, let's see if this works out. Let's see. This 5 plus that 2 gives me 7. Multiply it by the 4, get 28. So that's the correct answer. N is equal to 5. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. Make sure that you guys get 100%. You could keep taking this as many times as you want. This will help you raise your grade to a 70% or raise your score even further if you got something higher than that. Have a good rest of your day.